Hello, everybody. How y'all doing? Welcome back to the channel. It's your girl, Phylly. All right. Thank you guys for joining. Please make sure that you hit that like button right now and share this video out if you can. All right. Yes, we are back on Tim Norman. As you know, I did receive the closing arguments. We had the opening statements, but we never went over the closing arguments. So the entire transcript is now available if anyone else would like to purchase it. It's a hefty price. And I'm speaking of from the Tim Norman trial, for the M for Hire for our beloved Andre Montgomery, who is now resting in peace, okay? Because we did get justice for our Dre. Yes, we did. As you can see behind me as well in the background, there's Kalitha Phylly. We are definitely looking for justice for Kalitha as well. We're doing a lot of work on here on several cases, so make sure that you follow all of them, okay? All right, guys, we're going to continue off where we left from last night on the transcript, okay? So let's just get right into it, and I'm going to have some music playing in the background. Hopefully it doesn't interfere with the reading, okay? All right, let's get started. We left on line 23, I believe. It says, and during the course of his collection attempts, he lies to his own lawyer in 2018. Now, this is Angie Dennis in the closing arguments, all right? She says he says, I was in Cali when he got killed. Remember, Tim told that to an attorney, but he lied. He was not in California. He was actually in St. Louis. And this is the closing arguments where they are bringing it home, talking to those jurors. And we all know how it ended. He is going to serve life, but we're going to go over these anyway. So she goes on to say, it is not true. He wants you to believe he was in the Minneapolis airport when he first learned of the homicide. Look at those flight records again. He was sitting at the St. Louis International Airport when he received that call from Terica Ellis. So let's talk about it. She said, let's talk about count 1, the conspiracy to commit murder for hire. Instruction number 9. 2 or more persons reached an agreement or came to an understanding to use interstate commerce facilities, again, cellular telephones, with the intent that a murder for hire be committed. He says, look no further than the text messages again, ladies and gentlemen. Andre provides his address to Terica Ellis. Defendant calls his hired gun. Defendant meets with Travell Hill. Tim tells him a female is going to be in contact with him. Now he wants you to believe that Travell Hill, who is still very loyal to defendant Tim Norman clearly, wants you to believe that Tim never said murder. However, look at his subsequent conduct. The next thing he does is to buy a .380 firearm, and 2 days later, the defendant is paying him. So draw your own inference as to what happened at that meeting. Pretty much he's saying, hey, he discussed it. He told Travell to take Andre out and I'll pay you $5,000. And we all know that is exactly what happened. So at 2:17, as Terica Ellis is leaving the La Quinta Inn, the defendant tells her he isn't ready yet. Remember, we went over that, guys. She has to continue her efforts trying to locate Andre throughout the day. She tracked for Andre all day that day, guys, March 14th. At 6:30 p.m., her prepaid phone calls Tim Norman's prepaid phone for 30 seconds. And 4 minutes later is Ellis's first call to Travell Hill. He gets his number from the defendant. Element 2. The defendant knowingly and intentionally joined in the agreement or understanding either at the time it was reached or sometime later when it was still in effect. Well, the defendant initiated the contact with Terica Ellis on March 14, 2016, reached out on Facebook, then on his own phone. He instructed her to buy the prepaid phone and to only communicate with him, the victim, and Travell Hill. The defendant initiated the contact with Travell Hill at 12:22 p.m. on that date. And then he instructed Daryl, remember DJ Daryl Howard, to deliver the $5,000 to Travell Hill. Again, he was the architect of this agreement. He didn't just join in. That's right. He was the architect. But it not for Tim Norman, Andre would never have been executed. It was his plot. Goes on right here, line number 15. The defendant knew the purpose of the agreement. My co-counsel told you in opening statements. What you learned throughout the course of this trial is not everybody knew every part of the plan. And that is not required for you to find the defendant guilty of conspiracy. So pretty much they're saying that Terica did not know the entire plot of the plan, and that is why she is released. And she pretty much got, if you ask me, time served, and she is back in the Memphis area, okay, with her two children. As you know, her mother deceased not long after she was released from jail. It says Wally Yogman knew enough to do his part. Terica Ellis knew enough to do her part. Travail Hill, execute Andre, get paid, knew enough to do his part. Daryl Howard delivered the money from A to B, enough to do his part. And element 4, the defendant used a cellular telephone to carry forward that agreement. We talked about that time and time again. Cellular telephones are everywhere in this case. Now the defense counsel is going to have a chance to speak with you. I'll be able to address you one more time, and while you listen to what he has to tell you, I want you to remember the facts as they actually came into evidence. I want you to remember the reasonable doubt instruction number 6. That reasonable doubt is doubt based on reason and common sense. So you got to use your common sense, is what they were telling those jurors. When you swear that oath to be a juror, you do not abandon your reason and common sense. You keep that with you at all times. It is not doubt based on speculation. And I'll be up here again to speak to you to return verdicts of guilty. Thank you. So then the court says, Mr. Leonard, Ms. Rodriguez, you may proceed with your closing argument. And here we begin with the defendant's closing argument. Okay, Mr. Leonard is speaking to the juror on closing arguments, which Tim Norman's sentence was cemented. He says, thanks, Judge. We can yell and scream. We can raise our voices. But first of all, I'd like to ask you to consider 3 concepts when you consider the evidence. First of all, as counsel just told you, the burden is upon the government to prove Mr. Norman Tim guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of every count, and within every count of every element. What does that mean? Each of those charges that counsel has read you the elements for, if proof fails on any one of them, they don't establish proof beyond a reasonable doubt on any one of the elements for that count. You must acquit Mr. Norman and find him not guilty. That reminds me of Johnny Cochran. If it does not fit, you must acquit. May Johnny rest in peace. It says, as counsel said, it is not what might have been. It is not what's based upon speculation. Instructions will tell you it is not more likely than not. It is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That doesn't mean we can make up conversations when they haven't been presented. It doesn't mean that we can make up and fill a gap with evidence that they haven't presented. It is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And in the instructions, what it tells you is it is a type of proof that you would rely upon when making your most important decisions in your life. It is that level of importance, that level of proof, making your most important decisions in your life. Would you make your most important decisions in your life in part based upon a stripper who admitted that she lied to you, looked you in the face, and lied to you? Would that be the type of proof that you would rely upon to make life's most important decisions? He was speaking of Miss Terica Ellis, calling her a stripper, okay? Which, that was her job. In making life's most important decisions, would you similarly rely upon Travail Hill, a gentleman? You saw him. It is your job to gauge the credibility of a witness and why they are saying what they are saying. What was going on with that guy? First of all, He was here to get a lighter sentence, to get years shaved off his sentence. Mm-hmm. That's what he was supposed to be here for. And what does he tell you? Tim ain't got nothing to do with it. To them, it is the opposite. So that means Tim has everything to do with it. Does that make any sense to you? It shouldn't. I also want to hold you to the promise you made on September the 6th. It is probably so long ago you don't know what I'm talking about because it seems like a year. You made a promise to Judge Ross, to the prosecutors, to Mr. Norman, and to me that if the government failed to meet their burden of proof on each and every element, you would find Mr. Norman not guilty. I'm calling you on that promise now. He's calling them out, is what he was saying. What do those words mean that are on the screen? You heard them. They came from the witnesses in this case, even from Travail Hill. This is the type of guy Mr. Norman was described to be by the witnesses in this case. That's what they said about him. So what would you do in real life? Let's be clear. This is courtroom. Courtroom is real life. In real life, you would say, I have a history of a guy for 37 years up until March of 2016. That's what people say about him. That's what everyone who got on the stand, even the government's own witnesses, and said Mr. Norman, said about Mr. Norman. In real life, what we would do is say, when someone brings an accusation or brings something forward, I would look at the whole story. I would look at his whole story. What type of guy is he? What does he usually do? What motivates him? Who is he? Who is he as a person? And that was the picture that was given to you. Not a single witness had a single unkind word to say about his character, about his reputation. Nothing. And you heard the resources the government has. They have so many recruiting agents on this case. They got a guy in here to read text to you out loud. That's the resources they had. And yet the picture from every witness in the case was Mr. Norman is a man of character. He was a mentor. You heard it from everybody, from a producer in Hollywood to a guy who worked at the restaurant and moved his way up busting tables. Every single person. Miss Griggs, Andre's mom, couldn't come up with any evidence against him when she testified. She didn't say those kind words about him. And I'll ask you when you are evaluating this testimony, start with the Carl Napa text exchange with Tim Norman, right? Because this is 8 years ago and unguarded moments. No one is thinking 8 years ago, hey, we are going to be in court someday in front of a federal jury. I better watch what I say. And you heard his text. I'm not going to put it up, but I'll read it to you again. Carl Napa is the guy from the Extreme Institute. Tim texted him right before Andre was going to come back because Tim is trying to do a good thing. He is trying to get him into the music school. And he says, okay, thanks, bro. Miss Dana says, objection. Facts not in evidence, Your Honor. The court says, approach the sidebar, please. And these proceedings were held at the sidebar. Now, if you were in the courtroom, you were not available or allowed to hear this. The judge says, I'm not sure what you are reading. Mr. Leonard says, I'm reading a text that we read to the jury during the trial. So the court says, what does the text read? And Mr. Leonard says, they didn't object to it. We had a sidebar about, and that they didn't object to it. He said, what does it say? Mr. Leonard says, I'm about to give birth to an 18-year-old. The court says, okay, it was admitted. Ms. Danny says, I withdraw the objection. Proceedings resumed in open court. So Ms. Dennis thought he was bringing something that they had not already discussed. But so the court says, counsel, you may proceed. So Mr. Leonard says, we will go ahead and read that to you, folks. 8 years ago when Andre is coming back here, okay, thanks, bro. I'm about to give birth to an 18-year-old, know-it-all, badass dude. My single free man life is over. One of those fake tears emojis. Mm. That's what Tim was saying about the return of his nephew, like he was about to be a dad and this, that, and the other. But we all know that Tim planned and plotted and helped carry out the execution of his nephew, his deceased brother's child. It says, even Miss Griggs, Andre's mother, understood and told you this was a good idea. Everybody thought it was a good idea. Do you really believe when Tim Norman stepped up to the plate in the fall of 2014, he really was an evil mastermind? What his plot was? Let's get Andre back here, and then I can murk him. Do you believe that? I do. That's what he did. It says, does it make any sense to you? And then consider what Andre had to say about his uncle at the time. You heard this during the trial too. Andre texted him, and this is September the 12th, 2014. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you remember it. Andre says he loves you, Uncle. He says this is a 1 in a million chance that you are giving me the opportunity to go to $1 million studio, which is the AAI, and tells him words can't explain how glad I am to be in this music school. Thank you. I know it is all going to pay off soon. So it says, everybody understood what was going on. This guy was stepping up to the plate to be the father figure he wanted to be. But look at Tim's actions, okay? If he is an evil mastermind with an intent to lure Andre Montgomery across the country and murk him, he did a really interesting job of doing that. Yes, he did. What more could Tim have done as a mentor? He sets him up in an apartment in a beautiful area in St. Louis, down the hall from him. He gives him $100 allowance, more than I got, and gives him access to all of his cars. Gives him a car. Gets him into the Extreme Institute school by pulling strings, calling in favors, and the government would have you believe that's all just a ruse. This guy is so frequently clever that he does all of these beautiful things for his nephew, and he spends time with him going to Six Flags, going out to eat, all a ruse. Yes, it was because he had him executed. It says, you don't believe that. That's absolute nonsense. So let's talk. Let's talk about it for a moment before we get into some of the testimony. Counsel brought up the meeting because remember, there was a meeting on October the 7th of 2014. Who was at that meeting? Andre Montgomery, Wally Yachman. The location was Tim's place. How do we know? Because you have in evidence text where Wally is coming over to the place. They are going back and forth to come up on 275 Union, where Tim lives. You heard in detail about Andre sitting down at that kitchen table after they walked down the long hallway and came around to the kitchen table, and how Andre sat there and gave the information to Wally. That's what happened. That's what happened, a meeting. And what's interesting is the team of agents. There are dozens of agents working on this case. None of them stepped forward and said, hey, look, we have some phone records or some cell phone data or some Google data to say that the meeting didn't occur. Oh, it occurred. They didn't even cross Tim on the meeting. They heard his testimony. They listened to him talk in detail about the meeting. You heard Tim talk about the meeting. You know it happened. You know he was lying. They didn't even cross-examine him on the meeting because they know it happened. And she gets up and says, counsel gets up and says, a so-called meeting where a document was thrown in front of Andre Montgomery. Andre didn't know what was going on really. He didn't. He says, that is make-believe. There is nothing in the record to support that. That's make-believe argument to make you lose your eye on the ball. To think about something other than the evidence. And the theory gets even crazier. The government's theory is that Tim Norman traveled here from LA for the purpose of executing and carrying out the murder of Andre Montgomery, and did. Of course, again, not true. We know from Agent Faber, who got on the stand, he told you, yeah, you are right, counsel. Mr. Norman did travel back and forth from California to St. Louis on a regular basis. Tim told you that. Melanie Calvert, a producer from Hollywood with no reason to lie, told you that. They didn't even film on Monday, so Tim could come back and forth and get the cash from the States. And that's what he did that day too. He also went to the Chase Park Plaza, slept with Terica Ellis, left $5,000 in the drawer so DJ Howard could come back and get it. He also went to the Walgreens and bought some prepaid phones for him and Terica and Travell so they could carry out the execution on Drake at 3964 Natural Bridge. He also did that, Mr. Leonard. Okay, I digress. He says nothing to refute that, but it is true. They say it is true. But that's the theory. This theory, a made up theory, that is the devious plot to lure Andre back to murk him, and that he came here on that date for that purpose. He did. We know that's not why he came back. He came back to clean out the safes. And it gets stupider. Terica Ellis, right? You heard her testify. She is here to shave off years on her sentence. She told you that the government during the interview said to her, "You will never see your children again. You will never see your children again." What kind of motivation would that create for somebody to lie? If you told them the person you care about most in the world, you won't see them unless you tell some lies, would you create an incentive to shade the truth a little bit to you folks? He also told you that they repeatedly called her a liar. Their witness, they called her a liar over and over and over. Would that create an incentive to shade the truth a little bit? Of course. But what's the most important point? As you saw from the Facebook exhibit the government introduced, Tim didn't even have her phone number. He DMs her. It goes down in the DM. We all know that. That's how Gotti got Angela Simmons. He said, or I M's her. I'm not hip, but whatever he said, whatever you do on social media, right? I'm too old for that. But he contacts her and he says, did you change your phone number again? Because he doesn't have her phone number, but he used to have it. Imagine this theory. According to the government, he is traveling across the country to mastermind and murk, plot with a woman's phone number he doesn't even have. A stripper who likes to get money from him. Would that be a good candidate to enlist in your plot? Someone who wants to shake you down for money? Wouldn't you think if you were the mastermind they say he would be? That doesn't make sense. I'm not going to enlist her because, gee, if I get her involved in a murk for her, she will want a lot of money for that. Over and over, forever and ever. And it is undisputed that Tim hadn't talked to her in about 5 months. So the government's theory he travels across the country, we know the reason for that is false, what they said. To meet this lady, the stripper, enlist her, false, that month. And the other party of the story the government skipped over is that number one, Tim gave her money for sex, so not for sex. As we know from Tim's testimony and hers, she would shake the guy. She would shake the guy through Western Union, not for sex, but just for money because this all happened. That's who she was. And take a careful look at one of the first texts that she sends to Andre Montgomery when she is trying to help Tim locate him. One of the first texts she says to him, one of the first ones, something along the lines of, "I don't need no money from you." So what he was alleging is that whenever she would contact Dre, he would be asking for money as well. And who knows? Goes on to say, so she has to tell him in advance, "Hey, look, I want to talk to you or see you, but I'm not looking for money." She has only known the guy a week. She has just met him at a club. And she has to tell him that's the kind of person that she knows he would think she is, because she must have already hit him up for money. To try to get his attention, she says, "Hey, I'm not looking for money," which obviously she has already shook Andre down for money. The deposits of money, unfortunately, another fiction, folks. We are not stupid. The government is not stupid. We all know what's going on. Ellis told you, I work Thursday, I work Friday, I work Saturday, I work Sunday. I don't do this for free. I mean, she tells you she is so good. She don't need to do that. She don't need to lie to men or to do anything because she is so good at her job that she makes a lot of money being a good stripper. She worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and she took Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday off, huh? I bring that up to her because they didn't cover it. Oh yeah, I made some money every one of those days. But 6 years ago, that was a slow night. It was a slow night. Come on. Do you really believe that she can recall it was a slow night on one of those nights? She made several grand at least. She had sex with men all night, made more money. Oh my. I hope she didn't have sex with men all night. But we know it is a lie that she had $10,000 for Tim. How else do we know it is a lie? We played for you a snippet from her interview with these guys, with Detective Rudolph. Do you remember that? We played it out for you because she had lied to you. She had got up on the stand and they said, how much money did you get? She said, 10 grand. 10 grand? Played the audio and video of the interview. It took a while as I was standing here to play the tape because, as you heard, it took her about 16 seconds to come up with an answer. When they said, how much money did you get from Tim? And after thinking for 16 seconds, she said, 5K, 5K. So her testimony here was a lie. She did deposit almost $9,000 though. And we know she got money from a different source. We know she met with Tim at the hotel room. They had sex. They took their showers. And then what happened? She starts talking about her boutique that she is going to open in Memphis. And she is talking about how she has already booked a trip to LA to get supplies for the boutique. And of course, then the ask comes, can I have a little money, Tim, for the boutique? Tim agrees to give her 3 grand. So if we add all of the money she made stripping for 4 nights in a row, having sex with men 4 nights in a row, getting 3 grand from Tim, we are getting a pretty good idea of where the money came from when she deposited it, when she went back. And the point of that is, there has to be disagreement to do something wrong for money, okay? She wasn't getting money from Tim for participating in a scheme. She was getting money for her boutique, just like she asked, just like she always did. And then the discussion turned into locating Andre. We will talk a little bit about that. She said 3 times at least, point blank, during direct examination testimony. Let me go to the quotations. Here is what she said at the trial. Not what the government said she said. Not what I say she said. This is what she said of why she was going to go out and help Tim that day. What she was going to do. Tim wanted her to just help locate him. Tim wanted her to get back with Andre, and Tim wanted her to help get the money back. That's what she said. There was no plot, no plan to murk someone, set someone up. Tim said, hey, dude, it is amazing you know this guy, Andre. I can't really believe that you do, but I saw you text him. So now that I know you know him, can you get a location on him? Get the stuff back. That's what she told you. That's what their discussion was. There was no plot, no plan to murk anybody, harm anybody, set anybody up. So he didn't tell her, but he executed. He had his nephew executed. That's why he will spend life in prison. Get the location so we can get the stuff back. And of course, it didn't make sense after Miss and Tim and the investigator, all sorts of folks had spent 10 months trying to find this guy to get the stuff back. Why would you? Before you get the stuff back, why would you want to murk him? It makes absolutely no sense. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop right there on line 40. We've been reading for about 30 minutes now, and we will finish this up at a later date, maybe tomorrow. But I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure you like the video once again, and don't forget to thumbs it up. All right. Thank you for hanging out with your girl, Phylly. where this is still the #1 channel for all of the latest breaking news on Tim Norman. And we will be following his appeal as well. Thank y'all.
Long time, honey, but I know, yeah. Store. Everybody ain't your friend, everybody ain't your partner. I say I got you. Well, just hold it down and keep it solid. And when you're not around, I protect your name, I won't talk about you. Everybody ain't your